Hello and welcome. My cat is here. You wanna? Yeah, there you go. There you go. My cat's here. All right. One disclaimer I'll give is my tripod is kind of a piece of junk and it started tilting forward and pointing down. So I wedged a piece of paper under the part that needs to stay up. And if the kittens come in here and see that, you guys might go tumbling, and I do apologize, but we're gonna assume the kittens aren't gonna come in here because they aren't here yet. And Dax is a good girl who will leave it alone. So, anyway, let's start talking about the video for today. So, today we're going to be talking about rat food myths. So, basically, rats, as we all know, enjoy their food. They love food. It's fun for us to give them different varieties of food, to give them treats and stuff. But this does create a bit of confusion about what they can and cannot eat. And there's some common misconceptions about things that they can eat or can't eat that I just kind of wanted to talk about a little bit. So that is what we're going to be doing today. Let's get into it. Now, let's start with the most basic, which is a mix versus a pellet. So the two rules of thought that go into this is people say you should feed a pelleted diet or a nugget diet, depending on where you're from, because it contains all the nutritional needs that your rat has, and they're for sure getting everything that they need from that. And then the argument for the mixed food is that you can curate it to your rat's specific needs. It has more enrichment, and it is in general a lot healthier. Now in the UK, there is an anecdotal theory going around from owners. There is no science behind it, but a lot of owners have had this experience where when they feed nuggets, their rats tend to get more tumors. Now that is in the UK. In the US, you do have diets like the Oxbow diet, where I have never noticed that necessarily being an issue with people who feed their rats Oxbow. There are other things that come with Oxbow, like one day soon, I'm going to do a video specifically on the Shunamite diet and kind of give you a basic rundown of how it works, and I mean basic. I mean so basic, because it will be like a beginner video kind of, and I'm not an expert, which is why I haven't done it so far, but I do find that it can be helpful for even someone who's not an expert to kind of just give a basic rundown of things like this. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to do a kind of overview. Now, the other argument that people make for nuggets is that it reduces selective feeding, which is basically where the rats only eat the good bits and leave the bad bits that they don't care as much about. Now, I feed Shunamite, and I do find that I like it a lot more for my rats. Now, for the selective feeding aspect, if you just scatter feed, it does reduce selective feeding by quite a bit. Also, if you don't overfeed, because if you're giving them an appropriate amount of food, there's not going to be so much excess of the stuff they don't like that they won't eat it. So they will still eat the best bits first, but they will eventually get to all the other bits that aren't as favored. I love watching my rats. I come out in here like multiple times a day, obviously, and when it's around the time I do meds, I come in and one of the babies is always like at the bottom with their face completely buried in the bedding, pulling out bits of food, and it's really, really cute. I love it. Now, as for the argument that the pelleted diet is completely nutritionally balanced and good for them, it's a commercially made food, and at the end of the day, they will change the ingredients to make the food cheaper to produce so that they make more money off their product, because that is how companies work. They will constantly reduce things, change things, try to get as much money out of their product as possible. So while sometimes it's completely nutritionally balanced, sometimes it's not. And it also cannot be curated to your rat's specific needs. Rats have some varieties that need different kinds of protein, different kinds of care. Like Harleys, for example, they need less protein or a specific kind of protein. So either less protein, or I've heard people have had success with insect protein to keep their skin healthy. Then you have rats like hairless rats who also need to have healthy skin, which means they need to have like things like oily seeds that help their skin stay nice and hydrated. It's things like that. You can curate specific diets to your rats if you do Shunamite. And it is easy to avoid selective feeding by scatter feeding and feeding them an appropriate amount of the food. The other thing I've noticed with Oxbow versus Shunamite is that their coats are just a lot healthier on Shunamite. So while Oxbow might help their like basic nutritional needs, my Shunamite diet is giving them something that the Oxbow diet just does not give them. And again, this is more like US. In the UK, it is very, very frowned upon to use nuggets. And you can purchase the Shunamite diet from rat-specific companies, like I believe it's called Rat Warehouse. You can purchase it so that you don't have to mix it yourself. But for the US, you do have to mix it yourself, and I personally wouldn't trust independent people who are mixing the Shunamite diet unless they give you a complete breakdown of what they're using, because you don't know that that's a balanced diet. And unless it's someone you know and can talk to and is open with you about what it is, I just personally wouldn't trust it, because you don't know what they're doing. You don't know what's in it. Oh, and one last thing about Oxbow. When my rats were on Oxbow, they still got rusty butts. So while it might have it might have the basic needs of nutrition, at the very least, it didn't have enough copper for my rats. But yeah, that's the most basic of the diets. Let's move on to the extras, the other stuff that you can feed them. Let's start with vegetables. A couple of things that I've heard people say that they can't have are like broccoli, for example. Rats can have broccoli. It's perfectly safe for them to have broccoli. I give my rats broccoli all the time when I don't have other veggies, just because it's not necessarily their like favorite. Some of them get excited for it, and some of them are just like, okay, that's interesting. I'll eat that before I eat the herbs, but I'm not going to eat that before the herbs for sure. Another one is onions. Yes, rats can have onions. So dogs and cats cannot have onions. It can be actually very dangerous for dogs and cats to have onions, but rats do not have the same issue with them at all. If they get too much, it might upset their stomach, but otherwise it is perfectly safe for them to have onions. And in fact, the veggie mix I use in my Shunamite diet mix does contain onion in it, and I never find it in the cage, so they even like onion pretty well. Now, the other thing with veggies that people say a lot of times, if you feed them too much, that it can affect their poops. It can give them runny poop. And yes, it can, but you do have to feed them like a ton. I remember when I was in school, for those of you who don't know, I got into rats because my teacher in high school had pet rats, and a bunch of the other girls, only girls, but a bunch of the other girls got into rats too, and one of them brought her baby rats to school, and they were just feeding them baby carrots, like huge baby carrots. Baby rats were like this big. They were like 7 weeks old. And they were just feeding them carrot after carrot after carrot. And it did give them diarrhea. But if they had given them the correct amount, they would have been fine. So the key with this, and you're going to hear me say this a bunch, is moderation. Don't give them too much of anything, and they should be okay. Now, moving on to fruits. Let's start with avocados. So, yes, rats can have avocados. This is one of those things that people don't think they can have. They can't have the stone or the skin of the avocado, but the meat is absolutely fine. And in fact, they love it. In fact, I just gave my rats avocado right before I started filming this, and they all went nuts for it. Jelly's in the corner back here eating some avocado. Another one is citrus fruits. A lot of people think that your rats can't have citrus fruit, and this one is... A lot of people think your rats can't have citrus fruit, and they can actually. So with male rats, the pith of citrus fruit, which is the white bit, contains something called D-limonene. I'm just going to put that up here in case I mispronounce that, which I might have. I don't know if I've ever actually heard it said out loud before. Can cause them to have testicular cancer later on in life, but they would have to eat so much of it, such an insane amount of it, that it is just very unlikely that your male rat is going to do that. You'd basically have to be forcing them to eat that much. So citrus fruit is fine, again, in moderation. I don't really give my rats citrus because they don't really like it unless I'm eating it. If I handed any of my rats a slice of orange, they'd be like, that's interesting, Mom. That's a new one. But if I'm eating an orange, all of a sudden I'm the worst mama in the world because I am not giving them orange. They just don't really care for it. Fun fact for those of you who are worried about it, baby food, pretty much all baby food contains citrus in it because they use lemon as a preservative. If you've been giving them baby food, you can see that they're fine. It is not, honestly, that's something that you need to worry too much about. Banana is another one people get concerned about. It is fine for them to eat banana. It's just kind of high in fat and sugar. Same with avocado. It's kind of high in fat. So you want to give it to them in moderation. That's kind of the case with most fruits. Berries are pretty low in sugar in comparison to other fruits, and they contain, what's going on there? Hi. And they contain some good antioxidants, so berries are a good option, but fruits in general can be high in sugar, so you do want to be cautious. And I would be cautious to giving them the seeds of the fruit too, unless you know for sure that's safe. For example, cherries, just like humans can't eat the pit of a cherry, neither can rats. It's not safe for them. Moving on, let's talk about chicken bones. So yes, rats can have chicken bones. So with dogs, with the way the dogs chew on chicken bones, it is possible that a cooked bone will splinter and they'll swallow it and it'll end up hurting them. With rats, that is not the case. So when you give a rat a chicken bone, what they're going to do is they're going to gnaw the ends off, and basically they just grind the bone down into a powder that they can then safely eat. And then they'll eat, once they have the ends off, they eat the marrow on the inside of the bone, and then they finish off the rest of the bone. And this can be the case with any bone. I said chicken bone because that's what I give my rats, but you can also give them rib bone. You can give them like fish bones and stuff like that. Bones are safe for rats is my point. And it is actually a great source of calcium for them, and they do in fact love it and go nuts for it. Again, I give my rats chicken bones, and it's actually kind of fun, especially because if you have like a small rat like I have the dwarfs and you have a really big bone, watching them carry it around, it's like a cartoon character. It is so cute. And it's a lot of fun for them. The same is true with hard-boiled eggs. So if you give them a hard-boiled egg still in the shell, they can crack that shell to get to the egg on the inside. And the shell has a lot of calcium for them that they can really enjoy. And it's also fun watching them try to figure out how to get in there. Now let's talk about certain kinds of herbs. So a lot of people are worried about herbs because there's a lot of old wives' tales, honestly, about herbs that will keep rats away. And some of the ones that are mentioned are like mint or rosemary. Rats love mint. They love it so much. And it's actually really fun to give them mint because sometimes they'll take, or any herbs, any smelly herbs. Anytime you give them a smelly herb, they'll sometimes take it and rub it into their fur. And it's funny because for me, I give them their salads and then I go about and I do stuff. And then I'll later be feeding them their dinner or doing meds or something. And I'll be looking at one of them, I'll be like, why are you green? And they're green because they've rubbed herbs into their fur. And that's just a fun thing that happens with rats sometimes. So yeah, most herbs are fine for rats. Rosemary, mint, all those are good. Let's also talk about garlic real quick. Garlic, perfectly fine for rats. They can process it. Cats and dogs cannot, but rats do perfectly well with garlic. Some people like to give them a little bit of garlic when they have like a respiratory infection because it can supposedly help with the inflammation. And like, while that's not harmful to them at all, and if that makes you feel better, you can absolutely do it. But if they have something like respiratory infection, the best thing you can do is get them to the vet and get them on medication. If you want to give them a little bit just to kind of help them, like with some homeopathic stuff or some natural stuff, that's fine. Just make sure to also get them the medicine that they need. Which brings us neatly into chocolate, because a lot of people say that dark chocolate has the same effect. It can help with respiratory issues. And while it might help a little bit, it is not going to help as much as medicine will. But yes, rats can eat chocolate. Cats and dogs, again, cannot. But rats are able to process chocolate just fine. In fact, they like it quite a bit. So if your rat steals a chocolate bar, you don't have to worry. They'll be fine. I wouldn't recommend necessarily giving them a ton of chocolate because it is high in sugar and you don't want them to get unhealthy. You don't want to give them an unhealthy amount of chocolate. Which brings us neatly into junk food in general, which I only give my rats naughty treats on a very sparing basis. So it's like birthdays, or I tend to give my rats a special treat before I'm going to take them in to be euthanized. So on birthdays, I sometimes give them things like pie or whipped cream or things like that. Sometimes a cookie, just for, fun, for a fun birthday video for me. And then I'll do the same the day before I'm going to be taking them in to be euthanized. And that is also just for me to have like one last nice moment with them before I take them in to be put to sleep. But you in general don't want to be giving them too much junk food because they are tiny animals that are prone to obesity even when they are not dwarfs or spayed or neutered, which a lot of us have spayed or neutered animals, or spayed or neutered rats, or dwarf rats. So do it sparingly, very sparingly. Make it a special occasion kind of thing. And as a final thing, meat. Yes, rats can eat meat. Some people, there's a rumor that goes about that if you feed your rat meat, they're gonna get a taste for human flesh. Now, that's not a thing. Rats are omnivorous. They enjoy insects, they enjoy meat, they enjoy herbs, they enjoy grains and seeds. Rats are very opportunistic eaters, and they will, if they find an edible thing, they can eat most of it. So in general, you don't have to worry too much about what they can and cannot eat. You do have control over most of their food. It's only if, like, during free roam they find something that you didn't know is out that you might need to worry about it. But for the most part, rats are pretty hardy animals when it comes to food, so you don't necessarily need to worry too much. It is easier to find the things that they for sure cannot eat than the things that they can eat. This is not a comprehensive list. This is just me going over some food myths that surround rats. I hope you found this video helpful or enjoyable if you're just here watching for the fun of it. I did hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!